You know, I would like to first make a summary statement of what I learned from each of these wonderful presenters. See if you agree with me. And this is a good integration summary for those of us who have slept a little. Israel Rubenstein, one of my longtime co-workers, he I understood that says if you have everything in the world but you do not have motivation, you do not have anything. You can have wealth, you can have power, but you have to be motivated. Motivation here means the ability to do something which is greater than you. Perhaps this is the finest definition of motivation that we have seen so far. That ability to don't look at yourself as a very limited being, nor think that you are the center of the world, that you can define the world. The world is greater than what you can think, and you are finer, greater than what you have imagined. The balance between these two creates motivation. This is what Israel taught me. Elahi Khanum actually took you to a different journey of together, which actually is very much linked to what Israel said. I will be motivated to change if first I can recognize where I am. And also, I should have a little bit of ambivalence about where I am, what I think, how I feel. This phenomenon is called veil. The veil is something that prevents me from seeing the reality the way that it is. And it starts with me. It is me who puts limitation on me. It is me who defines me. And in general, the way that I define you is very much a reflection of how I define myself. This is why if I backbite, if I am anxious, usually the greater way than anxiety is when I pick on you. So what I learned from Elahi, that it is an art to recognize our limitations that is well imposed. What I learned from her was actually what I learned from Jung and also from, before Jung, Immanuel Kant. He says that you actually become human when you become enlightened. And you become enlightened when you recognize your immaturity, which in most cases have been produced as self-imposed dogma. The more you recognize your self-imposed dogma and you are willing to do something about it, then you become mature. So maturity is not your knowledge, it's not your degree, it's not your possession. It's the degree that you have come out from what Jung, Kant, Plato, So from the state of real immaturity. But the immaturity is not caused by others according to Kant. Those immaturities are because of the veils that we have created inordinately. And when they asked Immanuel Kant, how do you actually deal with it? He was not a psychologist, by the way. He is considered one of the greatest minds after Plato. I have not seen anybody who has written anything after Kant who has not referred to Kant. In fact, your best friend Jung was one of that matter of Kant. Kant said there is only one way: investigation of self, by self. Rather than you look at your value system that have been imposed upon you, the belief system that the society has generated for you, you have to question every single belief system that you have. And then adopt what creates a consistent self. This is, by the way, something that later on Carl Rogers picked up. Our anxiety, I feel, all are the result of conflict between how I look at myself and the experience that I have. And Carl Rogers said, to be human is to make sure you have a genuine self. Genuine self means what you think, what you feel, what you act, has the least amount of dichotomy. What is self? I don't know what is self, because from the time that I know what makes sense. The time that I know anybody had started to write, that has been the issue. What is self? This is why your best friend, Socrates, he said, go and know thyself. That is his famous statement. He actually, when Plato tried to interpret it, he said, the life which is not unexamined is not worth living. Plato. I suggest read these people. These are good people. They didn't have tie like you have, but they were nice people. I am not in a position to talk as a psychiatrist, psychologist, but as a person who has experience, a little bit of experience in this field. Majority of the problems, if not all of the problems that we have, is because of self. Somehow, either I have a problem with me, or I have a problem with someone else. I do not know if you are a therapist. You have found somebody who come to your office and say, what can I do for you? Well, I have come here to just see you. Because Melody, you have written a book on divorce. I just like to talk about your book. That is a good reason to go. But he's not talking about the book. He's talking about melody. He's talking about something that the melody has written. See, is it about somebody else? And then melody can easily say, why between all of these books you choose this book? Then you can see maybe it is my interest, maybe my divorce, maybe I want to get married, maybe my view about woman. So to make a long story short, that you do not sleep, self is a very, very complicated concept. but it is a central processing unit of life. To the point that they say anybody who wants to understand divine, God, he has to understand himself. This is why God within, Atman, divine within, in fact, was a concept that was introduced by the first one who ever wrote on these things, which was Krishna. When Krishna looks at the first chapter of the book, he talks about how to know thyself. And then he, for the first time in the history of humankind, as far as religion is concerned, he says the way to God is not outside. It's the way to God is inside. He says you try to locate him in heaven. You try somebody else to solve your problem. He says nobody will. You will have your disappointment. He says, seek the world within. He says when you look at within, then you have ability to love yourself in a healthy manner. Then you can love others in a healthy manner. Because love is a cohesive relationship between elements of the universe. Makes sense? Now, not to confuse. What is self? Is it my body? Is it my mind? Is it my soul? Is it the synergy? Is it the synchronicity, as Mr. Jung suggested? What is soul? I cannot define it. What is mind? Never mind. What is mind? I don't know. Some people is the attribute of the soul. See, it is unknown, unknown. What is body? What is body really? Body is my eye. That is not body, it is a matter. Eye by itself doesn't do anything, does it? Your hand by itself can walk, can pick. So the question for the philosopher, psychologist, scientist was, none of these three can be defined independently. But in terms of relation, we can define it. Body is a vehicle for the mind. Mind is a vehicle for the soul. The soul is the reality of the person and is unknown. And therefore Socrates says, reality of man is unknown. And because God is unknown, reality of man is unknown, therefore the process of unraveling your reality is a degree which brings self-awareness. Is there any synergy? Synergy means working together. Of course. If you only look at body, it is nothing but mechanical. If you look at mind, it is nothing but rational. If you look at soul, it is simply metaphysical. But reality should be metaphysical, rational, and practical. This is why the health of the soul impacts the health of the mind. The health of the mind impacts the health of the body. Majority of our stress are psychological disorders. As it says, is psychological, is not mental, is not physical, but when your spiritual orientation is not correct, your mind is affected. When your mind is affected, you have an ill emotion. When you have an emotional disturbance, then your behavior is affected. This is why Majority of the people today, they know that behaviorism by itself cannot help improve self. Cognition by itself cannot do it. Religiosity by itself would not do it. But the combination, integration, makes sense. Am I making sense? That is to say that health of the soul, health of the mind, health of the bodies have to go together. Now, let's see. What is meant by know thyself? Discovering thyself. This is a task. Who am I? Understanding thyself. First I have to understand where I am, who I am. What is my reality? Am I evil? God created me evil or God created me noble? Depends on what school of thought are you coming. If you really read the Genesis literally, you are in a bad shape. Well, if you read the Genesis literally, then the woman should never ever seek equality. Why? You committed a sin, my friend. God created me, I was a man, happy, in the heaven. Then I felt sleepy, like some of you have slept in this class. And then God took an advantage of the sleepy mode. From the left rib, Eve showed up. Eve, the first thing that asked was an intelligent girl. He said, okay, what's up? What should we do? He said, see, God said, do everything, but do not eat from that tree. And then she said, go for it. And then go for it. Then what happened? Sin was generated. Then what happened? Then Adam and Eve both were kicked out of heaven. And this is why, then see, you have to build up a story now. Now everybody is sinner, therefore somebody has to die for your sins. Very good. Then why woman has to be submissive? Why? Because she committed a sin. So why man has to be the head of woman? Why? Because it's very obvious. You created a story, you created an idea, you created a belief system, now you become a victim of it because it generates veins. So something which is very interesting is you have to examine your belief system. Because your belief system in most cases generates the present that you find yourself in. You lock yourself inside your belief system. I am not saying, please pay attention, this is not a course on theology. I am not saying Genesis is wrong. I actually consider Genesis one of the most symbolic, secret scriptures that ever have been written. It is a piece that for literalists, the person who took things literally created the downfall of humankind. For the person who took it as a poetry, as a symbol and secret, actually created phenomena of structures. So, what am I trying to say is discover thyself. Discover thyself means what is my belief system, why I feel the way that I feel, why I think the way that I think, how does that affect me emotionally, and then try to understand it. What are the factors that you have that belief system? Why do you have that belief system anyway? If you are a Muslim, if you are a Christian, if you are a communist, why? The more you say because my daddy was, the more because my mommy was, the more you create veils. Understand means enlightenment. Understand means try to get into the bottom of your soul and ask yourself why I am the way that I am. Accept thyself. If you lie, you have to accept yourself. Right? So, accepting thyself doesn't mean to be content with the negativism of yourself. Accept that your reality is higher than you, but also first deal with who you are. Because if you accept who you are, you will be kind to yourself, and then you make the change. Unless you first accept rationally, practically who you are, where do you stand, you never can accept the fact that you need help. This is why you go to the finest therapist in the world, you only lose money. Because therapists, scientists, is not trying to help you when you cannot even understand that you need help. The therapist is not the person who says this is what you should do. It advises you based on archetypes that he has. And then it says, you find your way. So, be thyself. Oh, we do everything in the world to escape that. Be thyself. Who are you? Are you a lawyer? Are you a mom? Are you Persian? Are you American? Are you Hank with your hat? Who are you? Be that reality that you feel you are. Don't define yourself with the titles that you have. Don't define yourself with the relationships that you have. Because relationships come and go. But your reality is what, in fact, helps you to approach it. Design yourself. What does design yourself means? You may not believe it, but one reason that we are all here is to learn what my aim is in life, what is my nobility, where do I stand, and how to get there. Design yourself means first accept where you are. Accept that you can make a mistake and never be ashamed that you are making a mistake. But be concerned if you make the mistake over and over. And even if you make the mistake over and over, try to find out why are you actually making that mistake. And then, internal private self. Do you know we have two types of selves? Public self, private self. Do you know private self, very unhappy. Public self is full of makeup. Have you ever gone with a woman who has a lot of makeups? So you wonder, especially the first date. Then you wonder, who are you actually dating? I'm not trying to be mean, but you have to become naked. Naked from what? Naked from the way that Mr. Descartes said. Do you remember Descartes? René Descartes, French. His very famous statement was what? I think, therefore I am. And then he said, what do you mean? He said, I became naked. Naked from my thoughts, naked from my feelings, naked from my culture, naked. But he said, then I said, I cannot doubt that I think. I know that I am. He says, what I think constitutes my real self. This is why. Who am I privately? Usually your husband knows you better than your neighbor, right? Usually your boss knows you better than your fellow co-worker who you brag. Usually your medical doctors knows you better than the person that you put the makeup to pretend you're healthy. What we are saying here is, you have internal feelings, whether good or bad, and you have external feelings. You don't like me, but you pretend to like me. You say things, but you don't believe it. What we are saying is, examine your thoughts, feelings, intention, desires, attitude, conscious, unconscious, meanings, And then look at the contributory factors that creates you, and then compare them. You can see there is a pseudo-self. Who you are is not how you look. The people who believe in you, who relate to you because of your beauty, you are only happy because the guy is ignorant. Why? Because reality of man, if somebody likes you, somebody respects you, should not respect you based on how you look. It should respect you based on the value that you offer, based on the services that you offer. This is why the honor of man is not the race, is not his nationality, is the degree of humanness that he shows for you. So as we can see, pseudo-self and private self simply defined. Internal self is how you really are. Pseudo-self is that public self that you pretend. Usually when the gap between these two are wider, you experience a lot of disorders, spiritual disorders. This is why the more the public reality and private reality gets closer, you are a healthier person. You might commit error, but you are healthier because you are not the man of two faces. Make sense? Yeah. Now, the last but not the least, few of the contributory factors. We have a personality trait, personality types. I'm not using it like Jung is using it, but there are some personality type. For instance, what is the personality type and attitude? Some people are, say, tell me, what type of personality type you have? You are an introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Right. Some people are feeling type, thinking type, all of these things. Your best friend, Jung. We are saying, all these things are coming as a gene or environment or a combination of both is beyond the scope of this session. But examine it. Try to understand yourself. What type of a person you are. And therefore, if somebody else is not as talkative as you, do not judge him. Maybe he's a different personality type. This is why it is important before you get married, you go and learn about this thing. Because after you get married, then you have to go to the divorce council. Do you see that? What am I trying to say? The more knowledge about myself, the more understanding about somebody else makes a more healthier relationship. Genetic, environment, my childhood experiences are very much impacting my personality type, my person. Don't you believe that? If you have had a very abusive childhood, the first 3 to 5 years, you see the world differently, don't you? You see the world, you interpret the world differently. This is why the whole concept of object relation becomes very important in psychology. Your relationship with the people who primarily your life actually were mover and shakers. This is why Erikson is important when you look at the development. This is why Piaget becomes important. But everybody agrees that the first few years, the experiences that you have with your parents or primary caregivers, mentors, they actually influence how you look at the world, how you look at yourself. Political systems. If you live in, say, Syria, Iran at this time, you see the world differently. Your self-image differs. Because you are born at the time of a war, your political system. If you are conservative, you see the world self differently, others differently. If you are a liberal, you see the world differently. Educational system. PhD. So I have to be very careful how I'm going to phrase that. But I think they would agree with me. America really has the best educational means, but it does not have the finest educational system. Educational system is an educational system that helps you to think on your own. Educational system is a system that considers people like a candles that they need to be turned on. It is not a system that I am an empty vessel and you pour it in. You see, there is a difference here. This is why in closed systems, you can see that people have a very high tendency to deal with the pseudo-self because they never learn critical thinking. They never learn critical examination of them. They brag a lot about their values, but they do not have any values because they never examine their values. This is why they become shallow in their values. There is no sense of steadfastness. So educational system is very important. And by that I mean whether it is holistic. That is a key point. Holistic means to be whole. Holistic doesn't mean think of a priest or something. Holistic means to be whole. Holy, wholest, healthy. If your belief system is not holy, whole is not holy either. But holistic means educational system that deals with the needs of my soul, the needs of my mind, and the needs of my body. Any educational system that does not deal with the spiritual need of a person, that is not an educational system. It is true that spiritual education is that I learn to be human, that I learn justice, I learn sacrifice. The rationality does not teach me sacrifice. To be human is to have an educational system that looks at the whole while considers a member, which is an individual. Makes sense? Another very important thing, the last but not the least, is a belief systems. Belief system, it can be religious, it can be secular, it can be rational, it can be humanistic. But no matter what your belief system impacts your view of yourself. If you are religious, depending on how do you understand your religious text, you have one view of the self. If you have humanistic, then you consider yourself as individuated, but at the same time very dependent on another human being. So think about that. I use now, because Jung is my super best friend, I use define your archetypes. What is your archetype? We have archetype, we're left at home. So there is an archetype. Archetype is a model. The word archetype comes basically from the Republic of Plato. The models that you use. We have the personal models and the universal models. Understanding the universal models in the world helps you to have a better sense of self and better appreciation of others. I think that will do it. What does life mean? That is another chapter by itself. Intrapersonal meanings that you give, interpersonal meaning, metaphysical meaning. All of these things impacts your view of yourself. What is the meaning of your life? Why are you here? Why do you want to be a lawyer? Why do you want to be a psychologist? The answer to that, the greater that it is, then you have a better, healthier meaning. If you go to a school in order to be a better servant, better human, that has further meaning Then you say, I want to become a lawyer because I heard that the Los Angeles lawyer makes a good money. Right? See, it is a meaning, but it has no meaning. I put that as the last metaphysical meaning. By metaphysical meaning, I do not mean religious meaning, by the way. I mean a spiritual meaning, holistic meaning. Religion and science are the means, are not the definable things here. What gives you global meaning in life? Are you to the point that you become like Einstein, that says, the more I use my intelligence, the more I discover, I just realize there is a reality much beyond me. If we get to that point, we find meaning in our lives. And then finish. I do not want to go on this thing, how to handle stress. I think already Melody handled that for you. Integrated being. This is the last slide. Holistic means make sure how you feel, how you think, how you act, what do you believe. All of those things have to synchronize, have to work together. Systemic. Remember, you are a part and a whole. The moment that you feel that you are a part or a collection of parts, you fall apart. But if you consider yourself as a system, that everything is correlated, it makes sense. The last three are very important. The concept of life after life. I see I didn't call it life after death. It wasn't a typo, because I don't believe you die, actually. There is no such a thing as a death. Death is only physical, is only temporal. You live eternally if your reality is solved, if you live spiritually. So I call it life after life. And also the last but not the least, Russian dolls. Do you know the Russian dolls? Russian dolls defines a doll. You pick up a doll, there is another doll. And then you pick another doll. My friend, what I see in you is an utter doll. What you see in me is an utter doll. Now, between the utter doll, I have a garment, I have a tie, I have a degree. They say, the ability to remove that doll, to go to another doll, and go on and on and on, and then you will see that that defines your true self. Thank you so much.